Over a century ago, Carl Jung divided psychic organization into 4 fundamental psychological functions that allow us to make sense of the world: thinking, sensing, feeling, and intuition. But for Jung, this wasn't just abstract theory. It was a way to understand how we each perceive reality and make decisions. First, there's thinking, the function that connects ideas through logical relationships. Then sensing, which transmits physical stimuli to our perception through our senses and bodily feelings. The feeling function assigns value, determining what we accept or reject, as in what we like or dislike. Finally, intuition bypasses logic and the senses to deliver insights from the unconscious, often presenting a complete picture without explaining how it arrived. Jung himself put it this way:
the sensation tells you that there is something. Thinking, roughly speaking, tells you what it is. Feeling tells you whether it is agreeable or not, to be accepted or not accepted or rejected. And intuition out there is a difficulty. You don't know ordinarily how intuition works. So when a man has a hunch, you can't tell exactly how he got at that hunch or where that hunch comes from. It is something funny about intuition.
As we develop, one of these functions typically becomes dominant, our superior function. It becomes more conscious, accessible, and reliable. This leads to 4 core personality types, depending on which function takes the lead. These are split into rational types, thinking and feeling, and irrational types, sensing and intuition, each of which can be either introverted or extraverted. In this video, we'll explore what happens when each of these functions is dominant and introverted, how they shape perception, behavior, and inner life. First, let's look at the introverted rational types. Those who lead with introverted thinking or introverted feeling. These individuals make decisions based on internal values or frameworks rather than external data or social consensus. While their thinking and feeling processes are logical and consistent, they're guided more by what's happening inside them than by what's going on around them. Introverted thinking turns inward, focusing primarily on the internal, subjective world. External facts aren't ignored, but they're not the starting point. Instead, this kind of thinking begins and ends within the individual, even when it engages with real-world information. To better understand this type, let me give you a quick example. Let's say you're working on a group project. The person using extroverted thinking takes charge and starts organizing tasks, setting deadlines, and assigning roles. Their focus is on efficiency, getting results quickly and effectively in the external world. Meanwhile, someone with introverted thinking might sit back and question the underlying logic of the entire plan. Does this even make sense? Their concern is internal consistency, not speed or output. People with dominant introverted thinking are deeply shaped by ideas that arise from their inner frameworks. They can be fiercely devoted to their inner logic, often stubbornly pursuing their ideas with little regard for outside influence. Yet paradoxically, they may still be vulnerable to personal manipulation, especially if it doesn't interfere with their thinking process. To strangers, they might seem aloof, arrogant, or emotionally distant. They rarely try to win people over, and when they do, it often feels awkward or forced. But those who get close to them often discover someone thoughtful, loyal, and deeply principled. Their communication style tends to be cautious, dense with qualifiers and caveats, a reflection of their inner precision. Progress can be slow, and they're often either silent or misunderstood, leaving them convinced, somewhat cynically, that most people are pretty stupid. When this type becomes imbalanced, they may retreat entirely into isolation. Repressed unconscious material begins to surface, leading to internal conflict and even mental exhaustion. In extreme cases, this can result in psychasthenia, progressive brain fatigue, and dissociation. Introverted feeling orients itself inward, guided by personal values and deeply subjective truths. It doesn't seek external validation and often interacts with the outer world only indirectly. As a result, it tends to be misunderstood. To understand this type more easily, imagine someone in your group is clearly upset. The extroverted feeling type immediately senses the shift and tries to restore harmony, maybe by offering comfort or redirecting attention. Their emotional radar is externally tuned, and they adjust to preserve connection. In contrast, a person with introverted feeling might not react outwardly at all, but feel deeply shaken on the inside. They quietly reflect on whether the situation aligns with their personal values. People with dominant introverted feeling don't always express what they feel. The depth of this feeling can only be guessed at but never clearly understood. In fact, they often appear distant or indifferent, especially when something feels too loud, too forced, or too emotionally invasive. They withdraw when confronted with what feels inauthentic or overly intense. Often, individuals with dominant introverted feeling present themselves with a soft, unobtrusive manner. On the surface, they seem peaceful or even childlike, but underneath lies a deep, rich, emotional life, one not easily shared or explained. They prefer emotional moderation in relationships. Their feelings aren't extensive but intensive. They develop depth rather than breadth. Big shows of emotion can feel overwhelming or disingenuous, and they may instinctively cool the intensity by withdrawing or quietly disapproving. As a result, people close to them can sometimes feel underappreciated, not realizing the depth of care being held silently beneath the surface. This type offers compassion inwardly, holding a private, often intense empathy for the suffering they perceive around them. Challenges arise when the ego overly identifies with their inner values, blocking out critical thinking or objective feedback. They may become overly sensitive to imagined judgments from others, projecting mistrust or suspicion onto the outside world. Over time, this internal tension can result in a neurasthenic-type neurosis, marked by exhaustion, anxiety, and psychosomatic symptoms such as fatigue or social withdrawal. Women with this problem often develop physical symptoms like anemia. Now let's talk about the introverted irrational types. Their primary energy is directed inward, so what you see on the outside is often restraint, quietness, or even confusion. They may struggle to express what's happening inside them, but that doesn't mean nothing is happening. In fact, their inner world is often incredibly rich and full of meaning. These individuals are a living reminder that the most important experiences don't always happen out loud. Introverted sensing is rooted in the subjective side of perception. While someone with this type sees the same physical world as everyone else, they're most attuned to the internal response that the external object triggers. It's not the object itself they focus on, but the personal impression it leaves behind. To get a better idea of what this type is like, let's take something as simple as drinking coffee. For someone with extroverted sensation, it's about the intensity of the flavor, the temperature, the buzz, everything experienced right now. But someone with introverted sensation takes the same sip and is immediately transported to a childhood memory, the same taste as mornings at their grandmother's house. He is concerned with a subjective response to the same drink. People with dominant introverted sensation often appear calm, passive, or composed, sometimes even philosophical. They might quietly wonder about the deeper meaning of life, or question the very point of human existence. Why do we need the object at all, they may ask, when the essential experience happens inside us? As their inner world becomes more active, it can overshadow the outer one. This sometimes blurs the line between reality and imagination, especially when the unconscious takes over. They can begin to perceive reality more through inner impressions than through what's actually there. Because they keep so much inside, others might find them hard to understand, or even unsettling. They can become targets for more assertive or aggressive personalities, tolerating mistreatment until they suddenly resist in ways that seem out of proportion. If they lack a creative or artistic outlet, their inner impressions may become overwhelming. Their vivid inner life has nowhere to go, and instead of expressing it, they're consumed by it. They can seem like they live in a mythic world, where people, places, and things take on dreamlike qualities of gods, monsters, or symbols, but they rarely share that world with others. Unconscious extroverted intuition quietly compensates for the introverted sensing attitude, offering subtle impressions and possibilities that keep the worldview balanced. Problems arise when their unconscious turns against them. Repressed extroverted intuition can erupt in the form of obsessive, irrational thoughts about people or situations, often marked by anxiety, withdrawal, and emotional exhaustion, rather than drama or outbursts. Introverted intuition turns inward, focusing on internal images, deep symbols, and elements of the unconscious. While external events may trigger it, the real activity happens beneath the surface, in response to what those events stir within. To make this type clearer, picture a brainstorming session. The extroverted intuition type throws out idea after idea, making wild connections. Their thinking is divergent, bouncing from one possibility to the next. The introverted intuition type, on the other hand, may say very little, until they speak with a single, focused insight. They've been following an invisible thread, sensing how everything ties together beneath the surface, synthesizing meaning from within. People with dominant introverted intuition often appear like mystics, visionaries, or abstract artists. Their minds are tuned to the collective unconscious, and their insights come from a place beyond tangible reality. They're more focused on what might be than what is. They tend to drift from one internal image or possibility to the next without always connecting these visions to practical life, or even to themselves. They can become so absorbed in the symbolic realm that they lose touch with their body, the moment, or how they're affecting others. When they try to communicate what they've seen or felt, their language often sounds abstract or poetic. It's hard to follow, not because they lack intelligence, but because they're speaking in symbols. Their insights might feel like proclamations rather than arguments, leaving others confused or disconnected. If they become too focused on their inner world, problems arise. The unconscious starts pushing back, creating intense sensations or compulsive attachments to objects or people. They may develop obsessions, hypochondria, or an overwhelming sensitivity to sensory input, almost as if their inner world is spilling into their physical experience. Now, it's important to understand that our dominant function never works alone. Jung emphasized that it's always supported by an auxiliary function of a different kind. So, if your dominant function is rational, like thinking or feeling, your auxiliary will be irrational, such as sensation or intuition, and vice versa. He also noted that if your dominant function is extraverted, the auxiliary is introverted, helping to create balance within the psyche. Understanding your type isn't about putting yourself in a box, it's about developing self-awareness, growth, and learning how to live in alignment with your true nature. In the next video, we'll dive into Carl Jung's original concept of extraversion. Not the watered-down modern version, but what it really meant in the context of the psyche. If Jung's functions make a little more sense now, or at least feel slightly less like ancient wizardry, consider liking, subscribing, and hitting the bell so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching.